Good morning. I would like to ask the clerk, can you please announce who's here and let me know if we have a quorum?
Present in the session hall, Senator Ray Tenorio, Senator Pangilinan, Senator Palacios, Senator Blas, Senator Guthertz, Senator Respicio, Senator Cruz, and yourself, Madam Speaker, and there is a quorum.
Thank you very much. Ile has returned. Guahan is a call to order. I recognize the Majority Leader, Senator Respicio.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on the matter of Bill 107, which is next on the agenda, the author is making copies of a substitute version, and there's general consensus that we proceed to Bill number 125, and I'd like to be recognized.
Yes, please, you may continue.
Madam Speaker, I move that Bill 125 be moved to the voting file with very brief discussion.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This Bill 125 is a shining example of the mandate that created the Guam Youth Congress program and the ability that whatever that organization duly adopts is automatically forwarded to the legislature for introduction. And in this case, Vice Speaker Cruz, who has oversight over the Guam Youth Congress, has introduced this bill on the Committee on Tourism, Cultural Affairs, Youth, and Public Broadcasting at the request of the 27th Guam Youth Congress. Now, this bill, if passed, would establish the Excellence in Youth Leadership Award. Originally, and this bill was referred to the Committee on Rules since it's a matter involving the operations of the Youth Congress. Now, originally, this bill would establish a Future Leader of Guam Award. And at the public hearing, we've asked the members of Youth Congress to consider revising this award, because we always say that the youth of today are not only the future leaders, but the leaders of today and tomorrow. And so they were very cooperative. They agreed and they accepted and embraced that kind of policy we've always had for them. And they've recommended that this award be the Excellence in Youth Leadership Award, and that's what this substitute version is. It's an award that the Speaker of the Guam Youth Congress, in conjunction with the Chairman of the Committee on Rules of the Youth Congress, the Executive Director of the Legislature, and Administrative Officer of the Youth Congress, shall solicit proposals for the design of this award and shall follow the normal government procurement process to establish this. And basically, it's to give the Youth Congress the ability to recognize their peers that have exceeded and have gone above and beyond and have done tremendous things in their own area. And so this, and another concern that someone said is, maybe you could just do this within your own organization. Why put in statute? And the concern the members of Youth Congress had, Madam Speaker, was, just because the current leadership wants to have this award, what if the next Youth Congress gets inaugurated and they don't have this same vision or want to follow the same idea? So if we put on statute, it's something that would be given distinction, it's something that would be recognized, and it's something that will continue beyond the current term of the Youth Congress. And so I ask my colleagues to support this bill. I want to thank the Vice Speaker for introducing this bill on their behalf, and I offer this up for discussion. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the motion, are there any other speakers? There being none, so no objections to the motions of sending Bill number 125 to the third reading file. 107, I recognize the author, Senator Pangilinan. We all have the substituted copy.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to move that Bill 107, as substituted on the floor, be accepted for the purpose of discussion.
On the motion, are there any objections? Well, to accept first?
Yes, to
okay,
accept.
so there are no objections, ordered.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to then move that Bill 107, as substituted on the floor, be placed in the third reading, and I'd like to just explain the bill briefly. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the bill in the format that you see, there was an original bill that came out of committee that is in your committee report, and then this substitute bill, just so that it can be followed, everything in the original bill is contained within the substitute bill, and the new language are only the underlying language of this. And what it does is it clarifies in the legislative intent what we're trying to achieve, and then it makes some technical language amendments with regards to the implementation of the bill. The bill does two things. One, it would repeal the continuing clause provision that is in the health carrier contracts with the government of Guam. Right now, if the government of Guam cannot agree with the health insurance carrier who's negotiating with them that's currently in this, they can stay in forever, basically. And that inhibits the ability of the government to negotiate the best deal, because you don't have what is the primary principle of insurance, and that is numbers. And so when you divide insurance enrollment into smaller chunks, you have what you would call in times adverse selection. And what that does is it raises the cost for one group and is a lower cost for the others, but everybody has to get charged the same in the end when you renegotiate, because then you aggregate the entire cost. And so this would allow the government of Guam, with the absence of that provision, to proceed with negotiating single contract if it wanted to ensure that we can get the best deal we can. But it doesn't repeal it today. It repeals it effective 2011, and that would mean it would be effective in contract year 2012. And we wanted to ensure that we have this record of what the other portion of the bill is doing, and that is getting the enrollment data, the utilization data filed with the government of Guam. That will greatly assist the government of Guam then in attracting other carriers. If you recall, Senator Leon Guerrero, yourself, and I had attempted to privatize or contract out the MIP program. And one of the biggest stumbling block was the existence of usable data by health insurance carriers and experts to be able to rate the program, to be able to determine what the utilization rate is, what those services are being utilized, so they can then decide the best price to propose. Absent that data, we couldn't get any interest. And so the government of Guam has continually improved its efforts in the health insurance negotiation process. And we continue to try to work with all carriers, but when we go out and we solicit carriers, they immediately ask us, what's your utilization data? What's your loss ratios? All of this information, and we're not asking for specific individuals, we're asking for group data that will not reveal any of the identity of the members of that group, which would be contrary to the Portability Act, Health Insurance Portability Act. So the second portion of the bill then would require health insurance companies who are doing business with the government of Guam, and they keep, by the way, they keep this data already. It exists pretty much in the same form that it's being requested. And that's what you have in Section 2 with regards to the information that's being requested. It would be contract-based information, so it's information for the group rather than for the individual. And so it includes things like the diagnostic code, the revenue codes, the service dates, the service provider code. But all of that, once again, I must emphasize, is general information that gives the government the information for how much service, what type of services, and how much is it costing us for those services to provide to our enrollees. And so what that does then is it gives us that information to be able to attract other carriers to inject competition into the market for health insurance services and providers for the Gov Guam employees and retirees, and that would then give us a better handle and better negotiating ability in negotiating with the companies. Now, this information is very crucial because the health insurance companies keep it from themselves. I have a little bit of expertise in this area, and it's very important to them to keep this type of information because that's how they propose their rates. That's how they decide what their profit margin is going to be. So if they don't give this data when we're negotiating, we really don't know what their profit margin is, or we couldn't verify those things without the absence of the data on utilization for services, providers, etc. So we couldn't really confirm, we kind of guess the best we can based on normal industry standards. This gives us specific standards for our group, and therefore we have the ability to then determine, okay, if this is what's happening, these are your rates, we think your profit margin is this much. And if that is it, then we then, from a negotiating perspective, decide what's a reasonable profit margin. No profit margin is bad for business, and it's bad for employees. We want the insurance companies to make a reasonable profit margin so that they can continue to expand services and benefits and lower costs, or at least not increase costs when they expand services and benefits. But we need that information, and if we don't have this type of information, we don't have the ability to verify or get as close as we can so that we're negotiating from a position of strength, if not from equality. Right now, we are at a disadvantage given the lack of this information when we're negotiating. And so this bill would provide the negotiating team, the government of Guam, with that information to strengthen our ability to negotiate better rates, better benefits, and better services for the Gov Guam employee. Because it is so important that this data really gives you an indication of their profit margin. If they don't provide this data, we then assume that the profit margin's too big, and if we knew how big it would be, that we would negotiate harder. So to give an incentive to the insurance companies to provide this information and implement the request for the information, that we assume then that if they're now willing to provide this, then there's a huge profit margin. Then I think that's reasonable to assume, and that they would just not provide it, and we again are at a position of weakness in negotiating. So what the last portion of this bill on page 5 is that if they don't provide us this data, then they give us a rebate on the health insurance premium of 2.5%. In other words, they reduce rates by 2.5% if this data is not provided, because that, the profit margin goes anywhere from 5% to 12 to 20%. I believe, in looking at the numbers last year, that this profit margin was close to 25%. That's a little unreasonable in my opinion, as having worked in the industry. And that's after administrative expenses and after reinsurance. So I think it's reasonable to assume then that if this data is not provided, there's a great cushion of profit margin, and it would automatically give us a rebate of 2.5% of the health insurance premiums. And that gives them the incentive to make sure that this data is provided to the government of Guam. And it doesn't cost that much. Most, if not all, of the information that we're requesting are already kept within the records of the health insurance companies. We're not asking them to do anything more other than compile that and send it to the government of Guam. And so I think it's reasonable that if they don't do that, they're protecting a profit margin, and they should share that profit margin with the government of Guam and the government of Guam employees by a rebate of 2.5% of the health insurance premium. So I ask my colleagues for their support and thank them for allowing me to explain the bill.
Thank you very much, Senator. On the motion, Senator Tenorio, you're recognized.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, the information that is being sought, as I understand it, is just explained by the mover of the bill and the author of the bill. As I understand, it's kind of been proprietary information. It's stuff that you don't, or a company wants to negotiate, I think, between the government and the insurance company. So it's kept, so you're not disclosing this to competitors. And so my question would be then to the author is, would this information then be available to other carriers who are seeking to provide similar services?
Would the author yield?
Yes, I will. It's not proprietary because we're not asking them, for example, for their administrative and overhead expenses, and that's their internal one. We're asking them for the services that we pay for our group. How much is it costing them to provide that service? So I don't think it's proprietary. We're not asking them for the contracts of their doctors. We're not asking them for that type. So it's general utilization data that should be generally available to the customer. I want to know how much I'm paying in these services for my group, and when you sell to me these services and benefits. So it isn't proprietary. I can assure you that it's not proprietary, and it will be used by the government to solicit other companies who may want to know what is your experience, what's your loss ratios in this group for those services, and only the service component, not the administrative overhead expenses, where you would have the more proprietary data.
Let me hold the question real quick. Is the information once received by the government then available for, if the information provided that you're seeking, is that then available to other companies, or just available for the government?
It could be available to other companies when the government says, you know, I have one carrier right now, I'd like 3 carriers. In order to get you to come in and bid on this program, you would need some information on what the costs are in the group. And that can be made available to these companies on a general basis, not specific basis, but on the general basis for the government of Guam, that then these companies can decide whether to bid or not, whether it's worth their time, whether or not they can make a profit while doing it, with their own assumptions for the group. So yes, this type of data would be generally available to those that want to bid on the government of Guam, because the reason why they're not bidding is none of this data is available, and they can't make these assumptions on the utilization, and we have no way of attracting them and so forth. But I can assure you that the information here is not proprietary.
Okay. Madam Speaker, thank you very much. I appreciate the gentleman responding to the question. Here's my concern is that, you know, we have an insurance carrier. Right now we only have one for the government of Guam in the health area, right? We've had multiples in the past. We've had multiple carriers in the past, and all have basically got out of providing these services to the government of Guam employees and retirees. And if you disclose this information, then are you giving an unfair advantage to another company? Because then they have exactly what the utilization is. And of course, these things change, I'm sure, from year to year, and the demographics somehow change. There's some variations, fluctuations that occur. But we're all interested in saving more money. I mean, the government of Guam doesn't need to be spending more money than it needs to, but we also don't, I think, need to be careful about providing information that would be maybe somehow handicapping or somehow giving an unfair advantage to another company that would ultimately know exactly how much they're spending in these areas. And then the other concern I have is about, you know, what the government, or we, as it was put, is a reasonable profit for a company. We say we have this group of employees who need services. We have these government of Guam or retiree people who need to have services, who need to have health insurance coverage. And then we're going to say, well, this is the reasonable profit margin. I think it's the cornerstone of capitalism to determine how much profit you can make based on certain ideals and certain services that you provide or products that you provide, whether it be to the government or anyone else. I know Obama and the Congress is now debating and is wrestling with this universal health care and providing a public option or no public option and other issues, but are we now going to say what is a reasonable profit margin for companies who are providing services to the government? Where do we stop? Do we now say, well, it's unreasonable for, you know, X company to provide this product at that amount because your profits are too high? You know, what we're dealing with is a free market, and the free market should be driving most of these things. How much profit a person makes or a company makes is driven largely by his or her ability to sell their services and products, whether to the government or anyone else. I don't know that we in this legislature have a role of determining what's reasonable profit for any particular industry, whether it be healthcare or concrete manufacturers or anyone else. We're doing a service in this island. If we, as in the people of Guam, are doing services in this island, are we going to say what's reasonable profit? Look, I'm not trying to make more money, you know, paid out to this government to any particular provider of service or product. I want to try to save as much money as I can. But I think that I'm a little weary about, or leery that is, about giving information maybe to one competitor on specific utilization of an area when we know that we have a large community of government employees and retirees who are using these services, and then saying, well, this is exactly how many people are getting this kind of product or service, this is exactly how much we're spending on this particular area, then you're giving maybe an undue advantage to another competitor who otherwise would have the same demographics that we have right now. We know that we have X number of employees, X number of retirees, and that is basically, these are negotiated services that we need in each one of these areas. If we're going to hand over this information to competitors, are we going to be basically handing them a tool to be able to undercut and then therefore possibly compromise the quality of service? I'm not sure about this bill, Madam Speaker, and I'm worried about the implications of determining what is reasonable profit for a corporation, any corporation, whether it be health or any other else.
Point of information, there's nothing in the bill that determines what a reasonable profit is. Whatever the final cost, final bid is going to be based upon negotiations. That's all. There's nothing in the bill, and I'll repeat that. There's nothing in the bill that talks about determining what a reasonable profit is.
Thank you very much for that information. You may continue.
Madam Speaker, I'm just using the words that the gentleman used, was saying what's a reasonable profit, as he had articulated when he first made his opening comments about the bill. We'll determine whether or not it's a reasonable profit. And you know, I'm not going to rehash what he said. He can explain what he said in his closing. I'm saying that when I heard what he said that we're going to look at what your actual utilization is and what you're charging. We're going to determine essentially what the reasonable profit is and whether it's too much. And that's why I think the final section 5, I think it was, said if you fail to provide this information, we're just going to cut you by 2.5% of the rate. Failure to comply with the requirements of this section will result in a 2.5% rebate on current fiscal year premiums from the non-compliant health insurance carrier. So then we're going to penalize them for failing to provide information. Madam Speaker, I think I raised my concerns, and I'm interested in hearing the rebuttal, and I'm interested in ultimately trying to provide the best service to all the government of Guam employees and the retirees, but I'm also interested in making sure that what we're doing is not undermining one company for the benefit of another company. We need to make sure that we're doing this fairly, and I think we need to be careful about what we're actually handing over to a competitor of one company to another. If we know what our ultimate needs are, we know what the services are, then are we also going to determine what the profit margin is, whether or not we're going to cut them 2.5% if they fail to provide that information? I'm concerned about this, Madam Speaker. This is Usmasi.
Thank you very much, Senator Tenorio. Are there any other speakers on the motion? I'll give then the primary author then to close.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, what this bill does, I think it levels the playing field for the government especially. In order to determine the best response we can get from a bid, we need to provide these bidders information. So we're not saying, you give us the information and we're only going to give it to one guy. Every single company that wants to bid on this will have the same information. It is our information. It's not the health insurance company's information. It's our customers. They're providing a service to us and we're paying for it, and we want to know how much we're paying and what our customers are using. And then we can decide we want a better deal. And so in order to get a better deal, and this other company says, I can give you a better deal, and to ensure that we get the best response we can, all they get is the information on the utilization. There's no internal information that's being requested by the by the doctors. We're not asking them what their contract is. When a patient goes to a doctor right now under the GovGuam program, and we know this now because the one company that we're not trying to protect, that one company that's in here now, has a contract with the doctor. So the patient goes and he pays his out-of-pocket cost, let's say at $30. The doctor normal charge is $50. The patient pays a $30 fee. The problem is, or what can happen, what happens, we know it because we get it when we try to file our claims, is that the health insurance company, because he has everybody can go to that doctor if they want. So he has a big pool. So he tells the doctor, I know your charge is $50, but I'm going to give you access to 10,000 people. And these 10,000 people, you're going to be part of my group, and this 10,000 people can go to you. So you have a captured group. So if I give you access to 10,000, will you cut your charge from your regular $50 charge to $25? And they say yes. The doctor says, oh yeah, because I don't have to deal with administrative work, etc., etc. You just pay me. So the patient pays $30 for his copay. The health insurance company takes that $800 a month for health care that patient pays and the government pays, takes the patient's $30 on top of that $800, pays the doctor $25. What did the insurance company pay with that $800? The patient paid the entire charge of the doctor plus additional $5 to the health insurance company. That's the type, but you see, we don't know that for sure, but we know it for sure when we file our claims and we ask our doctor, how much is the health insurance company paying you? And they say, oh, I charge them $25 because I can get 10,000 patients. But why am I paying you $30 and I'm paying my premium too? Well, that's between you and the insurance company, but I want access to 10,000. So we're just asking, how many times does that patient go to that doctor and how much are we paying from the aggregate? Not the specific doctor, not the specific patient, aggregate numbers by class, by, and so forth. So we know that the health insurance company is making a profit on the $800 premium, plus he's making a profit on the co-payment, which we never knew. So when we see the total picture of how much money they collect, how much money they're spending, we know that from that $800, they pay $0 to that doctor for that month, for that visit, and the patient pays the entire charge, plus an additional $5 goes to the health insurance company. So it's that aggregate information we're looking for. And we can't say that, so that really is the intent. We're looking for this aggregate. So when somebody comes to bid, we want to know, all your patients went to the doctor 1 million times last year, and you paid all the doctors $800,000. We know then that you make $200,000 profit on that segment of that service. So when we come to it to say we want to bid out this, the bidder can come, well, you know what, this is what happened last year. $1 million was paid to all the doctors for all the visits, for all the people covered. And so I can either decide that I'm only going to make a 10% profit, he's going to decide that, and I'm going to propose that for that service, I'm going to propose $900,000 instead of $1 million when I price out my product. All of those decisions are made outside of the government's influence. All of those decisions are made by free market people. The government's not telling them, lower your rate there. The government's saying, now you got somebody else here who's going to propose another rate based upon what my people, my customers, my consumers have paid and I have paid out. So it's general information, and everybody then gets access to that kind of utilization information, which belongs to the government of Guam. And the government of Guam has a right to that information, in my opinion, to get the best deal that it can. So when I say we'll determine what your reasonable profit, that's all based on negotiations. Because when you go in, I used to sit on the company side of the Guam Health Insurance negotiations. So I used to negotiate for a company that provided health insurance companies. And we would go in there, and go in with our figures, determine what we want our bottom line to be. This is our line, and we would inflate that based upon our experience, based upon, actually sometimes we even based upon who's negotiating. because we know the capabilities of those people, and we know what information we have that they don't have. We know where we can reduce costs, we know where we can reduce our proposals, and still maintain what we want without the government knowing what our final number is. That's the negotiating. That's free market, you know? And I think that from me and the government, I just want to know, well, how much did my people use last year? I don't have that information. You keep all that information, but they're the information that belong to my people, and my dollars paid for it. I want to know, you know, where those segments of costs are, where those cost centers are, so that when I can negotiate from you, I have a better idea of how much you're making, and I have a better idea, I have a better idea of how much I want to pay for this. And it's all based on negotiation. Nobody is saying 5% profit margin maximum. That's not happening here at all. It's all based on the negotiating capabilities of the government and the private company. And what I want to make sure that the government is armed with the best information that it can get for the consumers that it covers and the money that it pays to negotiate the best deal that we can. And so that really is the intent of this. Information is knowledge, knowledge is power, power begets strength. And we start with information. And we just want to ensure that we are in the best position we can be with everyone that wants to do business with us. And nobody is going to have access to any information, more information than the other. As a matter of fact, it really is the existing company that has all the advantage in negotiations right now. If we wanted to bring somebody else in, because they have all the information and are in the best position they can. In order to ensure that we attract others to consider providing a service to us, they have to have some basic utilization data and information that becomes available. And I think that that's what this does, and I just hope we can see it and understand. I certainly understand the concerns being voiced. I mean, those are, in my opinion, those are legitimate concerns on the side of the people, on the side of the business. I'm here to work for the government and the side of the people. So those concerns are being voiced from the perspective of the current business, the current provider, and I don't blame them for finding somebody to articulate that on this floor, But I'm here to represent the government and represent the people and provide the government and the people in the government the best tools available to them, the best information that they can have in order to allow them the best ability to negotiate on behalf of the people. Thank you, Sidus Masi. And I'd move to have Senator and Speaker Wampat as the second co-sponsor.
That motion without an objection, so ordered.
I know that the author of the bill has made his closing statement on it, and it's really taken me a while to digest the bill, and I do have just one concern. If I'd be allowed to speak on it, I really would like to offer something.
I will allow you to. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, I certainly am in support of the idea of requiring the carrier or the insurance provider that is currently contracted with, that has a current contract with the government to provide that information, because then I think that is certainly very important for prospective bidders in the next round of the contracting period, so that everybody knows then just really how much of a demand there is and basically the demographics of the people being insured that is placing the demands on the insurance and whatnot. I have no problem with that. Where I'm a bit concerned about is on page 5 there, on line 7, with that provision about the failure to comply with requirements of this requirement to provide this information will result in a 2.5% rebate of current fiscal year premiums from the non-compliant health insurance carrier. And then it's followed by a sentence then that says that if the information requirements are not being complied with, then that carrier's subsequent submittal of a proposal will be disqualified. Certainly, I think that second requirement seems to be a big enough hammer that if you want to get back on the game, into the game, then you should comply with providing the information. Otherwise, we will not accept your proposals. But the first part, I'm a little concerned about. Actually, I'm kind of confused as to, well, where did this 2.5% come from? And then how are you going to get back the 2.5%? Because the way I read it is that at the end of the year, if the information has not been if it has not been provided, then we're going to basically assess them this 2.5%. Well, we say 2.5% rebate. It's really going to be a 2.5% penalty, but the money has already been paid out. So now we go into court and to try and get that 2.5%. So it seems that if we're going to provide that provision, it should be that maybe on a quarterly basis, if the information is not being provided, then that non-compliance will be subject to 2.5% penalty or rebate of whatever that quarterly premium is, and we deduct it off of the next premium. And then if you don't comply again in the next quarter, then you get hit with another 2.5%. But we do that before all the money has been paid out. So I have a concern with that 2.5% part.
Would you like the author to yield to your questions?
Yes, please.
Senator Pangilinan, do you yield?
Thank you very much. The 2.5% was basically, we wanted to make the rebate provision a little bit more than what could conceivably be a cost to implement the reporting requirements. So we just wanted it to be big enough to incent, to make sure that they would rather provide the information than give us a rebate. So that is that's where that 2.5% came.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
2.5%, 3.5%. I'm not hung up on that. What I'm concerned about is that it appears in reading this is that at the end of that contract period, if he has not complied, then we're going to ask for a 2.5% rebate of the premiums paid out, and then on top of that, basically disqualifying from bidding again. I would like to maybe propose an amendment, and I would need a little bit of time to just work it out with the author of the bill, that really this is kind of a, here are the requirements, and if you don't provide that data by the end of the quarter, then we're going to withhold 2.5% of the premiums that's due to you. And if you do the same thing again next quarter, then we're going to withhold it again. So I would ask for a short, just a short recess here, and propose that. And unless the author is adamantly opposes making that sort of an amendment, then we'll let it go as it is. And that for me will be a deal breaker.
Okay, we're going to take a brief recess. The legislature is back in session, and we do have an amendment. Senator Pangilinan, will you be proffering the amendment?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to thank Senator Ada for his amendment. I assisted in writing it up, so I'd offer it as an Ada Pangilinan amendment, if he doesn't mind. Is that okay with you, Senator? Ada Pangilinan. Ooh.
Okay, Ada Pangilinan it is.
Yes.
Okay, you may continue.
That's like AP. That's a very
AP,
wide
very
network.
good. You're right.
The AP network. Thank you very much. And based upon the concern raised and the idea raised by the good author of the amendment, which I certainly and wholeheartedly agree with, we offer this. It would be to add the line that's double underscored there, so that on page 5, after line 9, the initial language on page 7 would continue, be the first sentence would continue there. Failure to comply with the requirements of this section will result in 2.5 rebate of the current fiscal year premium from the non-compliant health insurance carrier. And then the amendment would be to add then, the information shall be provided quarterly. The rebate shall be deducted from the premiums due to the carrier in the succeeding quarter if the information is not received within 45 days of the end of the quarter. So basically what this gives the companies is about each quarter they're supposed to provide this information. Then they have another month and a half after the ending of that quarter to compile the information and submit it to the government, which is very reasonable, once again, Madam Speaker, because I assert that this information is basically data that every good health insurance care provider, keeps for their own personal records as well. For their own records, as well as, I'm telling you, the information we're providing here is not something that is not. It's pretty standard and common practice for health insurance carriers to provide this type of information to the companies that they do business with, and in this case, that company is the government of Guam. As a matter of fact, for the federal government, if you wanted to provide health insurance to the federal government, you are required, if you want to participate in the federal health insurance program, to provide this information to the federal government. And the federal government even goes further, that not only do you provide this information to the federal government, but the federal government actually sends a team of people to come to your place of business. They get access to your database. They can extract the data to check whether you're giving them the correct information. We're not requiring that at all. We are requiring that the information be reviewed and attested to by an actuary, and then just given to the government, and the government then can do its own due diligence to try and analyze that data and ensure that we're getting the best deal that we can for the money that we pay for health insurance services for our employees.
Thank you very much. On the Ada Pangilinan amendment, are there any speakers? Senator Ogden, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Just in terms of making sure that there's clarification with the reporting requirements, we do have on page 3, line 19, where it reads, no later, where information shall be provided no later than March 1st of the current fiscal year in electronic format. And then in the proposed amendment, it would require that information shall be provided quarterly. So there just needs to be a clarification in terms of ensuring that it's either quarterly or by March 1st, in terms of trying to ensure that there's proper correlation there. So I don't know how we would try to mesh these two, or do we stay with March 1st as a required timeline and then quarterly subsequent to that? Or how the sponsor of the amendment or the legislation would like to make sure that there's clarification in that regard, because obviously there are two timelines that are being set here. One is on a quarterly basis based on the amendment being proffered, which I stand and support, and the other one really highlights a definitive date of March 1st. Madam Speaker. So please, if we can just get a
Senator
clarification on that.
Pangilinan, do you yield to the question? You need to take a brief recess? Okay. Brief recess.
Thank you, Madam.
But do they run on calendar year, fiscal year?
The legislature is back in session. As Senator Ogden, you are recognized for an amendment.
Madam Speaker, because this particular amendment deals with page 3, would you like to dispose of the amendment that is on the floor right now? And then please give me the
Okay, so you're not
opportunity to
going
be
to
able to make
speaking
this.
on that amendment then
Yes.
anymore?
Thank you, Madam
Okay,
Speaker.
so, thank you very much. So, on the Pangilinan, Ada Pangilinan amendment, Senator Blas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I recognize, the intent of the amendment and the intent of the bill, and quite honestly, I really don't have a problem with it. I'm just concerned here with, first off, with regards to the amendment, and I know that it's also part of the bill, because I'm just concerned about the use of the word rebate in this instance here, recognizing in a lot of times when you refer to rebate, you refer to pay and then get back.
Would
I
you
don't
like
know-
the author to answer that question?
If we can, yeah, and first off, maybe we should change that word from a reduction, 2.5% reduction, as opposed to the rebate, because the rebate is we're gonna have to pay them, and then they're gonna have to give it back to us. Now, really, they're gonna make the money off of that, and we're gonna give them 45 days. So I would first like to make an amendment where it says the word rebate, on the first line, and then even on the third line. Change the word rebate to reduction.
On the amendment then, are there any objections? No objections, or?
My second concern then, ma'am, is when we talk about 2.5% of the current fiscal year premiums, and then we're talking about a quarterly, are then we going to say 2.5% of the total premium on a quarterly, or is it 2.5 quarterly? Quarter. And see what I'm saying is when you're reading this, it's 2.5% of the current total. So at the end of the year, let's say they never comply to this, you're talking about 10% of the total premium. And I'm sure that that's not the intent. So I work on language that we say it's only 2.5% of the premiums due for the quarter. Okay?
And where are you putting that on?
The current quarter premiums, it's, right.
Okay.
Okay.
So then it will be to delete the words fiscal year and add the words after current
Quarterly, right.
Okay, on that amendment, no objections, order.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank
Thanks,
you very
ma'am.
much, Senator Blas. Are there any other speakers on the Ada Pangilinan Blas amendment, as amended by Blas? None? Okay, so are there any objections to the amendment? There being none, so ordered. Senator Ada, Senator Ogden, you're recognized on your amendment.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, just to ensure that there's clarification in terms of the reporting requirements, and it's consistent with the amendment that was just passed, I do have an amendment that would be inserted into on line 19, page 3, right after the date March 1st, delete the subsequent words until, or insert the following words, please. The amendment was circulated, Madam Speaker. It would read March 1st for the final updated data for the previous, and then continue with fiscal year. So the words "off the current" would be deleted, and the following words would be inserted in replacement for that. It would read for the final updated data for the previous, and continue with fiscal year in electronic database format and whatnot.
Okay, on the amendment, the clerks were able to get that?
They do have a copy, Madam Speaker.
Okay, so we're deleting, in addition, deleting the words "off the current." And it read March 1st for the final updated data for the previous fiscal year. on that amendment? Are there any objections? No objections to order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the, you still want to close? Oh, one more final amendment, Senator Pangilinan, you recognize.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on the final amendment I'd like to offer is on page 3 of the last line, line 26. That last line reads, information submitted and notarized as reviewed and approved. I just wanted to strike out the word notarized as, and so that it would read information submitted and reviewed and approved. So take out the as, notarized as. So we would not require that the information be notarized, because sometimes these companies use an off-island actuary, and I think that's, but we do want them to review it and approve it.
On the amendment then to delete the words as notarized, notarized as on line 26, page 3, no objections, so ordered. Thank you very much. On the main motion then to send Bill 107 as substituted by the committee and further substituted on the floor. No objections to the third reading file. Thank you, so ordered. We're now in Bill 150. Oh, you did that, wait. Okay. Right here, I'm sorry about that. 152. 152. Senator Respicio, you recognize.
Thank you. I was just going to ask for technical correction to the agenda. 150 was moved to the voting file already. So now we're on 152, right?
Okay, well, because it didn't show that, it wasn't reflected on my second reading. Thank you very much. So Bill 152, and I recognize, let me get the bill itself. Where's the bill? Who's the author? Senator Pangilinan, you recognize.
Thank you very much, Senator Dismasi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to move that Bill 152, as substituted by the Committee on Appropriations, Taxation, Banking, Insurance, Retirement, and Land, and this is the bill contained in the committee report, be accepted and moved to the third reading file.
And you would like to speak on it?
Yes.
Yes, you may.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill 152 is a bill that would recognize the reestablishment of the Guam Farmers Cooperative Association of Guam and assist the reestablishment of this, was providing them the resources to give them the opportunity to construct an outlet for farmers' produce within a piece of property in the Dedido area. The Farmers Co-op has actually reorganized over the last couple of years, and they've actually done quite well. They have temporarily located in the old Guam Police Department precinct through the good grace and cooperation of our fine mayor of Dedido, Mayor Melissa Savares, and have used that site to actually provide a venue for acceptance of produce by its members and the sale of produce. They have succeeded in working very closely with the government of Guam, with the University of Guam in the reestablishment of the association. In addition, they have actually applied for and received federal grants to assist them in enhancing the operation and the capabilities of the Guam Farmers Cooperative Association. What they need is a place to call home, and this bill would set aside and allow the leasing of property in the Dedido area at the corner of the entrance to Weddingale, just right across the mobile station. Now, the property is currently designated and in the inventory of the ancestral lands. And what this bill would do would be give and grant to the farmers a 50-year lease, 25-year with a 25-year renewal option, access to that property to assist them in the construction of a real farmers market and a real farmers co-op, so that they can then provide, with the expected growth that we're looking on our and seeing in our island, the ability to have a state-of-the-art facility that will ensure that farmers who decide to make a living of farming on Guam, to support their families, to help our economy, to expand the health and nutrition available through the growing of fresh fruits and products and vegetables, the place to be able to come together and in a cooperative association fashion, market these goods and services and products to the island. One of the things that have really been a challenge for farmers on Guam is what you would call value added. Farmers, when they grow the vegetables in the field and market them in the state that they're harvested, that's just a direct value from field to market value. Sometimes farmers, and where the real money is made really in farming is value added after the crop is harvested. And this is something that the farmers have been dealing with, have been challenged with, is how to add value to their product. And you can do that in many different ways. You can do that by cooking the product and then selling it, and that gives value added to the product from field to harvest. You can can the product and add value to preserving it, extend the shelf life so you don't have spoilage. All of these things are some things that the farmers of Guam have been challenged with. And part of that challenge has been, where can they do these kind of things? And where can farmers who don't want to provide that value added to the product itself can bring their product so that they don't have to deal with that and somebody else will do it. And this is what the association kind of sees in its future. You know, many of the questions we have, and we've all been challenged this via email, via conversations with members of our community who say that the stand we're taking on the military buildup is going to deny opportunities for all of our people, and they're denying jobs and economic activity. Well, one of the ways that we can, one option for economic activity that in lieu of the military, but even in this case, it isn't even in lieu of the military, it's in support of the military. But let's just say that they don't come. What is our option? Well, farming. Farming's our option. And one of that is, it's called import substitution. If we can find and get this organization, assist them, we can substitute and stem the outflow of dollars for produce that we send off island to buy. When we buy the corn at Payless, instead of buying it from Mr. Wistic, Payless first has to take the money to go off island and buy the corn there. That money's gone. It doesn't circulate in our economy. It's gone. So we don't have the multiplier effect of that dollar that goes off island to buy that to sell here. If we can just say, substitute importing, let's say we import 1 million pounds of corn a year. If we can say we can produce 100,000 pounds of corn a year, that is import substitution. That's money that stays on island, provides jobs, provides opportunities, and we don't have to send that money off island. If we can substitute the importation of pork products, vegetables, all of this, every time we chip away at importing product, agricultural and commodities on Guam for sale in our store shelves, then that's money that we stay, and that's growth. That's money that gets circulated in our economy. So that we don't really need to just grow to enhance economic activity and economic viability on the island. Growth is not always the answer. More is not always the answer. In this case, less is the answer. The less money that we send off island to buy products and foodstuffs for our community, the more growth we have on our island. So this is a reverse of that. And so if we can substitute these imports, it means we're growing our economy. And this bill would give the resources to the Farmers Cooperative to be able to do that, to give them the chance to succeed, the support that we need, and the support that they have sought for themselves, we have actually put in here and memorialized it in this legislation. So that to enhance success, and the farmers realize this themselves, but we want to assure ourselves that experts exist at the Department of Agriculture. Experts exist at the University of Guam. So in order to kind of assure ourselves that we have a better chance of succeeding, this bill would require that the farmers' cooperatives seek the assistance and the cooperation of these experts in the various government agencies to help them succeed. And so that is really the gist of this. We realize that the property is coming out of the ancestral. I don't want to hide that fact from anyone here. But we believe that the good that's going to result from the success of the farmers' cooperative is going to make up for that. Now, I had talked to the farmers' cooperative about how do we give back? If the farmers' cooperative is successful, because we are investing in the farmers' cooperative in this by providing them the land. By providing them the land at $1 a year. I don't want to hide that from anybody either. And their success will stimulate the economic activity, and that's where we can do that. But we also want to ensure that we kind of give something back to the ancestral lands to meet its mission in making whole the landowners whose properties are not able to be returned to them. So I would like to reserve the rest of my time in my introduction to work on an amendment that I'm making. I invite my colleagues to speak on the bill, but I do want to kind of memorialize in an amendment that I have on this bill based on my discussions with the Farmers Cooperative and their cooperation to this end. So I'm writing up that amendment now, and I'd like to close my opening, but reserve the opportunity to make that amendment at the closing. So thank you, and Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator Pangilinan. On the main motion, Senator Uggan, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. This is Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, obviously when you're dealing with establishing a farmers cooperative and trying to reinforce that particular industry that's out there, the agriculture industry, as an individual who grew up in that environment, it certainly gives me a lot of pleasure to be able to stand here and support this legislative measure. Just a couple of things that I'd like to also share. First of all, the sponsor of the legislation had highlighted that there's an arrangement or a partnership here between the Office of the Deputy Mayor as well as the Farmers Cooperative Association, and I want to commend the two entities for executing that and working together collectively to work with the sponsor of this measure so that in fact it benefits ultimately the industry and just as importantly our local farmers. When many years ago there was a farmers association that was established that utilized property here in the Agana area, and unfortunately for whatever reason there may be, that particular organization was not successful. And Madam Speaker, I saw visibly the benefits of that farmers association, cooperative association, and the ability of that association during the course of a number of years when it was successful in allowing the farmers to concentrate on their expertise, and that is growing and planting the crops, tilling the soil so that in fact they can bring their produce and the items that they have to sell over to that farmers cooperative association, that particular environment, that facility that was previously provided by the government of Guam. During that time period, you know, and it brings back a lot of memories in terms of backing up the pickup truck, unloading the watermelon, unloading the melons and whatnot into this farmers association enterprise and allowing them to be able to market the produce to our local facilities and our local retail outlets. At that time, not necessarily do I want to reflect on the closure of that facility, but really on the successes of that farmers association during that period of time when in fact I was directly involved in the tilling of the soil and growing obviously produce. And I thank my dad in particular for really the experiences I had during that time frame, because it brings me to this particular issue. When you look at the establishment of a farmers association, Madam Speaker, with the express purpose of promoting and advocating the farming industry here in Guam, the agricultural industry, and most importantly, with the focus of allowing this entity to receive the products and the produce from the farm or from the backyards, and to be able to allow that entity to market that and be the intermediary between the farmers as well as the retail outlets. I think it's a wonderful concept. It's a wonderful concept that has proven successes in Guam over the course of the past many years, and I certainly hope that that's exactly what will be proffered here in terms of this relationship. We're looking at, I know that there was a concern that was raised about giving properties, government properties out freely by this body. But you know, Madam Speaker, when you look at really the contents of this legislation, and you look at the Farmers Cooperative Association, incidentally, it was reestablished officially in November of 2007. So it's still, I consider it, still in its infancy stages in terms of developing that concept and ensuring that they are able to provide the appropriate marketing services as well as the appropriate venue for our farmers. But for these individuals to have collectively come together and to partner with the Deputy Mayor's office so that in fact they can bring back the concept of a farmers association to ultimately benefit the local farmers and just as importantly the economic industry here, the agricultural industry, I think certainly is commendable on the part of the individuals who are contributing to this process. Just a couple of things, Madam Speaker, if I can propose a couple of amendments to this measure, and I hope that you can follow me on this one if in fact you would like me to proceed and extract a few trees out there, then I will move in that particular direction. But on page 4, Madam Speaker, and I hope the sponsor of the legislation is following this concern, it reads, the use of the leasehold shall be limited to those activities consistent with the mission and purpose of lessee as detailed in its governing documents. I like to insert the word right after documents on line 9, page 4, and for activities authorized herein, because that would directly relate to a subsequent section here that authorizes the Mayor of Dededo to be able to join in a partnership in this arrangement. So, Madam Speaker, right after line 9, after the word documents, to insert the word and for activities authorized herein.
On the Agan amendment, which is on page 4, line 9, after the word documents, add the words and for activities authorized herein. And you want to talk a little bit more about it, because you're saying that there are activities that were listed from the mayor's and
No, but it would be as and for activities authorized herein, so it would reflect, because this is a key provision, Madam Speaker, that allows for the leasehold to be it really restricts activities for the use of the property. So that's why we're expanding it slightly, and Madam Speaker, I think it's necessary that there's clarification in this.
Senator Pangilinan on the amendment. While they're conferring, I want to welcome Senator Spaudan for joining us, and Senator Calvo, thank you. Welcome back. So on the Agan amendment, are there any speakers? There being none, no objections. Oh, on the, okay. So there being none, so ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If I may continue on on page 4 also, on line 14, the way this reads, Madam Speaker, it says that the lease shall be valid upon execution by the governor and the duly authorized representative. But then it also continues and says that the lease shall require the concurrence of the legislature. So, Madam Speaker, if I ask you to follow me with this verbiage so that at least there's that tie-in, on line 14 to read shall be, delete the words valid upon execution, so it will read shall be executed, continue by the governor and the duly authorized representative of the association, comma, and and then delete the words the lease, and then continue on with that phrase. So it would read, Madam Speaker, on line 14, page 4, shall be executed by the governor and the duly authorized representative of the association, and shall require the concurrence of the legislature in Guam. So I believe that there's much more clarity in terms of, yes, the documents would be necessitated by and effectuated by the governor as well as the representative from the association, but ultimately it would require the consideration of this body.
Okay, the words are in page 4, line 14, after the word shall be, at the word executed, strike out valid upon execution, so be executed by the governor and the duly authorized representative of the association, at the word and, delete the list, so be and shall require the concurrence of legislature in Guam. Is that correct, Senator Ada?
Thank you very much, Madam
Clerks,
Speaker.
were you
Yes.
able to follow through?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Are there any objections? Anyone would like to speak on the amendment? Are there any objections? No objections, so ordered.
And one more item, Madam Speaker, if I may. On line 22, same page. The lease, it would read, I guess my biggest issue is the lease shall contain a provision granting the mayor of Dededo access to the lease. And I would move in the direction of making sure that not only is it part of the lease arrangement, but also that an understanding is established between, a written understanding is established between the office of the mayor of Dededo as well as the association. So if you can follow me again in this, Madam Speaker, it would read, the lease shall contain a provision granting through a memorandum of agreement, just insert the words, through a memorandum of agreement, the mayor of Dededo, access and use, then continue on with the subsequent verbiage. So it would read, line 22, page 4, the lease shall contain a provision granting, comma, through a memorandum of agreement, comma, the mayor of Dededo access and use to the leased premises, and then continue on with that paragraph. Because I think that if it's documented, then regardless as to the change of leadership in the association, Madam Speaker, and the change of leadership, granted the Dededo mayor is successful in their endeavor to get into the legislative body, then obviously there will be a change in the mayor of Dededo and the leadership in that village. So at least it would be in black and white in the memorandum of agreement. So, Madam Speaker.
So the Ogden Amendment, again, on page 4, line 22, which is G, the lease shall contain a provision granting, comma, through a memorandum of agreement, comma, the mayor of Dededo access and use, at the word and use, to the lease premises. Is that correct, Senator?
That's correct, Madam Speaker.
Clerks, are we able to get that? Okay, is there anyone who would like to speak on the amendment? None. Are there any objections? None. So ordered.
Madam Speaker, if I can beg your indulgence, just one more. I think that this body occasionally is questioned about the verbiage that we apply to the University of Guam in terms of their involvement with other activities. So on page 5, on line 5, I know that there's been good coordination, Madam Speaker, and I want to highlight that there's been good coordination between the University of Guam, College of Natural and Applied Sciences, and representatives from the association. But the word there, shall, coordinate, I think is quite an imposition, and I don't want us to be questioned in terms of I guess, insisting that the university proceed in a particular direction. So, Madam Speaker, with the concurrence of the sponsor of the legislation, I'd like to move that on line 5, page 5, the university would read, Applied Sciences may assist in these, so delete the word shall and then coordinate the services. So, may assist in the facilitation of meetings and dialogue.
Okay, so on page 5, again, line 5, the University of Guam College of Natural and Applied Sciences, delete shall to may, at the words assist the and facilitate, it'll be to facilitation. So may assist the facilitation of meetings and dialogue.
And continue.
So, is that correct?
That's correct, Madam Speaker.
Clerks, are you able to get that information? Yes? Please let me know if you, okay.
I can
Are
work with the clerk if
Are
in
there
fact
any
it's
speakers? None. Are there no objections? So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you very much, and I
Can
certainly
you
stand in
please make
support of
sure
the
that the
legislation.
clerks do have that in writing, please?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much. On the main motion, I have Senator Palacios. Okay, after Palacios, I have Senator Respicio. Senator Respicio?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I just wanted to quickly rise in full support of Bill number 152 and recognize that not only do we have people who are behind this farmers co-op concept, but the Dedo mayor was here yesterday. Also, the director of agriculture was here. He's here again today, as well as some staffers who work at the UOG extension program. You know, I want to recognize the sponsor of this bill for understanding the need to give the farmers a home. When we look at the Department of Agriculture, Madam Speaker, we've always encouraged that department to wake this sleeping giant up and to tell them that there's no reason why we have to import a lot of the fruits and vegetables that can certainly be grown here locally. And in dealing with the farmers, we continue to ask them what's the probability of them selling, like in the case of Mr. Wistick, selling his sweet corn to the hotels, or in the case of other farmers selling their shrimp or selling their produce. And the problem that these farmers have always had historically, Mr. Speaker, with the hotels is the hotels won't commit to buying produce locally because the farmers are not able to commit to producing these produce on a regular basis, and that's been a catch-22 situation for as far as we know it. Now, if we were to pass this bill and allow for that building in Dedido, this is a former Guam Police Department, if we were to have that building designated where farmers throughout the island can bring their produce there, and then they'll be guaranteed that if they're going to commit to growing all of these produce, that there'll be an additional venue to sell these produces to the community and also to the hotels. And, you know, I want to take a moment also, Mr. Speaker, to commend the farmers for recognizing the need to come together. For too long, you've had farmers doing things individually, but because of the leadership behind this cooperative association of Guam, they've united all the farmers to say, let's just have this building. Let's, after we secure the building, let's continue to work on additional funding that's necessary to make this thing work and guarantee its successes. But more importantly, to have all the farmers unite and have them have a place to bring their produce and sell it. And also, one of the advantages of this cooperative program, as I understand it, is that when they enter into contracts with the hotels and when they commit to giving certain amounts of produce, whether it's corn or tomatoes or eggplant or cucumber or whatever it may be, this cooperative association has a network that if one farmer is falling short on supplying corn or whatever it may be, they have a resource where they can tap other farmers to make sure that these contracts are serviced and the hotels are getting the vegetables and the fruits that they need for the tourists they provide. Not only that, with the military build-up, we're going to see tremendous opportunities to have these farmers grow, expand their crops, and have additional customers to support the produce that they generate. So I rise in full support of this bill, and I want to commend the sponsor, and I want to commend everyone involved for recognizing the need to have a farmers cooperative association home, and the next step as the sponsor of this bill, is committed of trying to find a way to seek additional funding that they may need to support this program. So I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Respicio. I note in the order, Senator Palacios was not in the room at the time that the speaker called, so Senator Palacios, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, of course, I rise in support of this bill. This bill, I think, would give rise to the rebirth of the old Guam farmers market that I used to know. I miss those days, Mr. Speaker, when I would go to Anigua, the old farmers market, and I'll buy seeds or feed. Because I do maintain a small garden when space is available around my house. And of course, currently I have a few goats, but I love gardening. I mean, I love these things to do, and I think I was raised in this kind of environment. I believe that this is a wholesome activity, and I believe that I would like to share this with my children to see how it's done. And it's not that I cannot buy vegetable, it's just the thrill of growing it. And if a farmer's market, I would like to be a member really of this, because if nothing else, at least membership would give would have the privilege of buying it, I guess, at a cheaper rate, or come together and put your resources. What I like to see eventually, of course, and even with the Department of Agriculture, is to go back and continue to offer maybe a breeding stock, maybe maintain a few, or maybe just the male species, or maybe a pig or a goat like that, and people can come then or borrow that to their house. Anything about farming, I support, Mr. Speaker. And I love it. I like this to come together again, and I hope that I live to see the day when there's a ribbon cutting ceremony in Dedeon, and I'll be there. And of course, I say here that I would like to be a member of the Guam Farmers Cooperative, because I think this will grow into a larger group and to benefit. But we need to go back to the farming, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Palacios. Senator Blas, I apologize. I was just going down the list. Senator Blas, you're recognized, followed by Senator Ada and then Senator Calvo. At least that's the listing that I have.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, no apology accepted. And actually, there was no need for an apology. Mr. Speaker, first off, I want to publicly, and I want to thank the main author of this legislation for giving me the opportunity to co-sponsor this bill, of which I stand in full support of. And I bring it, one of the discussions as we probably hear many people talk about with regards to the military buildup is, okay, what alternatives are you going to provide just in case this thing doesn't fall through? Here it is. Here's one of them. Last week I was out in Taofofo, and I was looking out over the valley of Babula. And if you look at the EIS, and as far as what their plans for Babula, they were planning on using that as basically a range, okay? But I saw that in a different light. If they don't come, I can just envision and imagine that whole area being used for agricultural purposes, or for farming, or for livestock purposes. One of Guam's best kept secrets is we have the sweetest corn in the world. And I think we all in here can attest to that. I remember there was one time the speaker went around and she had husked the corn from the cob, and we were sharing it amongst each other in here. It was the best kept secret. And I think this is a secret that we need to, for lack of a better term, exploit. And can you imagine Guam being recognized for this, as well as its other products? Along those lines, too, there's this whole other discussion, about a healthier Guam. This would help in that initiative too as well, because then we're buying a fresh produce, we're buying fresh products, and we're having a healthier Guam. But more so, we look around and we've got the wide expanse. And I love this because this is the alternative that we can provide in case the buildup doesn't happen. Or if it does happen, this is what we can provide too. This is how we can use our lands. It's a great start. This is a great start. I encourage and I ask for unanimous support of my colleagues on this, which I consider to be a major step for a major economic boost that Guam can receive as a result of establishing this market. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Blas. Senator Ada and then Senator Calvo.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in full support of the bill, of course, in support of our local farmers. I just have really a minor question, and that is the on page on page 4, subparagraph F there, starting at line 19. It reads, any change in the tax status of the lessee shall require an immediate renegotiation of the rate of the lease. So any renegotiation as a result of change of status is limited just to the rate. Now, I don't know, it would seem to me that the lease that we will enter into with a nonprofit organization could possibly be quite different from the lease agreement that we would enter into with a for-profit organization. So I would simply like to make a simple amendment that basically says that any change in the tax status of the lessee shall require an immediate renegotiation of the lease, not just the rate, but of the lease itself. And then it goes further to say that, of course, if it changes to a for-profit, that the rate of the lease shall be no less than 10%. So it just simply provides the government really with a little bit more flexibility in what it can renegotiate. So my amendment is then to delete there on line 20 the words, the rate of. So it would then read, any change in the tax status of the lessee shall require an immediate renegotiation of the lease.
Are you also suggesting that the rest of it be deleted?
No.
And just the rate of the lease without the other parts there? Or
No, I have no problem with the second sentence starting there on line 20 that the rate shall be no less than 10% of the actual market value of the property. I have no problem with that.
so the amendment is a simple delete rate of, and it be just
On line 20.
renegotiate the lease.
Correct.
Anybody wish to speak on the amendment? Senator Pangilinan, you have this look on your face. Do you wish to speak? If not, do I hear an objection? There's an objection. Do you wish to speak on your objection? No. There is an objection. Anybody else wish to speak on the ADA amendment? Senator Blas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I recognize, the concern that the good senator from Manila has with regards to this. And I also, too, have a little bit of concern here because then when you say immediate renegotiation of the lease, I'm concerned that it may also infer that we may nullify the lease in its entirety, and it can be canceled. And it doesn't sit well with me on that. So although I recognize, what hopefully is the intent of it, I'm just concerned that if we do that, then if we say, immediate renegotiation of the lease, part of that renegotiation is that we just may void the lease or nullify the lease. And that's my concern.
Thank you.
I think this probably would require maybe a short recess so that we can talk about this.
Okay, then I will take a short recess. Senator Addie, do you wish to continue? All right. Next on Senator Calvo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in full support of Bill number 152. I've had an opportunity over many years, I was in the private sector, to visit nearly every island in both the Micronesia, the Polynesia, and some of even the Melanesia region. And one thing that is it is common when you go to many of these island communities is there is a central public market where both the fishermen and the farmers are there to sell their wares and their produce or their catch. And this has been, I would assume, this has been something that has been common in these communities for millennia, for hundreds, if not thousands of years. A little history in Guam, same in Guam. There has been always, back in the Ganya, we go look back 100 years ago, a central meeting place where farmers and fishermen could sell or barter, at those days, barter their produce or their catch. Over the years, again in Guam, again with the American administration, things got more simple after World War II. A lot of our farmers were displaced as a result of the war. And then, of course, we got the sea rations coming in from the GIs and the stores being set up that, of course, jobs being created through the government sector first and then the private sector, is that many of our citizens gravitated away to really what was the core of this community and other island communities, which was, of course, farming and fishing. And thank goodness we still have, over these many years, a group in this community, and a core group, that are, again, continuing to practice a trade or a profession that has been going on in this island for hundreds, if not thousands of years, particular to fishing and farming. But again, what has happened over the past few years, again, there has been this reliance on things that are simple. Getting a canned good or a produce that could be air freighted or shipped in from the United States or from Asia. And with that, again, with folks now moving out of professions such as farming and fishing and going into a job in the private sector or the government, there has been less and less of our people that are practicing this trade. Times are changing. Again, if you look at the price of petroleum and fuel, and you look at the cost of bringing these products in, this particular produce, very expensive. There has been an opportunity for our farmers, and in fact, that's why we still have farmers, because there is that opportunity. With this particular language in this bill, and what it does is it actually now sets up a physical plant, an area or a location that our farmers can use to sell their produce. And I think this is so important. Hopefully, again, with the support of both our education system as well as our local government in terms of science as well as business support and advice, they can, again, efficiently produce and farm at the most cost-effective manner, and then, of course, have the necessary expertise to market these products. You know, when I had lost in my earlier run to run as lieutenant governor, I spent a couple of years off, and I did a little farming, like the senator, like the earlier senator mentioned. I am a little backyard farmer. Hard to believe, but I am. Of course, I use remember, I used to work at PCC, so I know 1616, chicken manure. Well, I used to be a farmer, a backyard farmer. But I tell you, really, but it wasn't really the backyard farming, but a little bit of the time I had spent in the private sector working with folks in the retail business and sister company is that a knowledge that over the past few years, the type of produce being grown in Guam, the quality of the produce, is really of top quality. And it was mentioned about corn. It's not only corn. You could talk about our papaya or our watermelon, et cetera, et cetera. We really have just top quality produce being grown in our island. When I was in the private sector for that two years, we attempted to get a bunch of farmers together in an informal basis so there could be this cooperation. One of the things that are noted, and you can talk to any retailer or a restaurant or a hotel establishment that buys fresh produce, Guam has always been this feast or famine. There will be in one time no produce available, and then in another time it comes out like everywhere. And because of it, this extreme high supply, you have, because of these farmers requiring and needing to sell their produce, they get themselves in a little price war, and in fact not little, a big price war, and they end up cutting each other's margins and profits, and where they lose. Everybody loses. So over the past few years, there's been this problem where our farmers are not collectively working together to understand really what the demands of this island are, and then cooperating so to ensure that those demands are met. And also, there has been this lack of, and I hate to say it, but confidence maybe from the folks, and whether it's the normal consumer, homeowner going out to buy produce in a village, in a street stand, or a supermarket, or a mom and pop store, or a hotel or restaurant, not really concerned about the quality, but concerned about, am I going to have it tomorrow? Now, with this opportunity, when I see here, Guam and our farmers are going to have this physical plant, this area from which they can, of course, sell their wares. I'm totally in support of this bill. What we need now to do is to ensure how we can work as a policy-making body to help assist our farmers come even closer, not just in physical terms, but also in a strategic plan, so that these farmers can work cooperatively, understanding that they all have to compete, they all have to sell their product, but understanding that if they work collaboratively with each other, understanding all the information that maybe that can be given to them through government policymakers such as ourselves, understanding and working with the folks in the private sector, such as the stores, such as the hotels and restaurants, that they'll have a good idea what demand, what potential volume there is, and we all work that out. It will be a win-win for everybody, the people of Guam, and this is something that I encourage and I intend to move forward as well. But with that, this is one piece of the puzzle, and I rise in full support of Bill 152, and I ask also for the support from my colleagues as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Calvo. Senator Muñoz-Barnes, followed by Senator Gutherts.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I too want to stand and rise in full support of this Bill 152, and I'd like to thank the author of the legislation for giving me the opportunity to be his co-sponsor on this bill. And as in what was presented in the public hearings, and with all the farmers who came out to testify, and I know there was a whole full room of them, Mr. Speaker, one of the things that was said was, you know what, after all these years, there's finally a venue where we can go to, and we can have our produce being that we grow here, that we can sell, that we can give to our community. And better yet is knowing that Guam is in this little dot in the middle of the Pacific Ocean on that globe, and almost everything, I think 90% of everything that we have here is imported. We need to realize that in order to live, we need to look at creative ideas to keep what we can grow here, keep what we can realistically live on, is our crops and our vegetables and what we can grow here. And we have to be able to support the experts that do that. And a lot of that is our farmers. I know that there were some concerns in the meeting, but I know that if we truly believe in our heart that these farmers work extremely hard and know that what they grow is a part of what we need, I think it's a true win for everybody. And I'd be remiss if I just didn't mention this for the record, but I have a very young son. My youngest out of 3 children is a 20-year-old. He's going to the University of Guam. He had the opportunity to be scouted for baseball. And because he didn't take his SAT test, he said, okay, I'll decide to stay here at UOG. And because of that, by education, he wanted to work with the sport he knew the best was to play baseball, but by trade, he continues to farm our Chalampago property. And while other kids are wanting cars and Toyota trucks and all that, Jathan would say, I want a Carabao. And I went, you want a Carabao? And he said, yes, Mom, I need a Carabao because I need to be able to understand how to live here, understand what it needs to farm here, understand what it needs that when things can't get imported, I know that I have some sustainability on what I grow and what I have here. And I was really, really, really grateful and appreciative that in this generation today, there are still some young adults who really believe and love this island and know that this is such a great place to live in, but also realizing that in order to live in this place, you've got to be able to survive. And for me, it was a true appreciation of knowing that my son wants to become a Chamorro teacher and to work with the Department of Agriculture and to continue to farm the land that he lives on today because he thinks that there's no other place as beautiful than Guam. But for something of that magnitude and to know that we need to continue to support the farmers, this is one way I can tell Jathan that I have a true appreciation of what the farmers do here today and where he wants to go in his journey. And I thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand in full support of this bill and thank the author for making me a part of that, and I ask my colleagues to help support this bill for a win for this island of Guam.
Thank you very much, Senator Barnes. Senator Gutherds, you're next, and you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. Some of you here may remember the Green Revolution, which was an initiative of former Governor Ricardo Berdallo. When Governor Berdallo was governor in his first term, he developed a plan, a master plan for Guam's development. And I remember that document. It had sort of a coral color with beige pages, and it really was a comprehensive vision of what Guam should be like in the future. And a significant part of that plan was an emphasis on sustainability through agricultural production locally. And many of you remember when Governor Berdalio was governor that he did everything he could really to help the farmers, to promote agricultural activity on the island, even to the extent of working to provide land that could be used by those who wanted to farm to help realize this green revolution. So I think somewhere around us, perhaps above, Ricky's probably looking down and saying, this is a good thing to do, to bring forth this vision and to emphasize the importance of sustainability within our agricultural realm. I think this is a wonderful, wonderful bill. I commend the authors and the sponsors, and I think that our community will be very supportive of this initiative. In most countries of the world, you find agricultural cooperatives operating. You find fishing cooperatives operating. You have indigenous crafts areas as cooperatives where people design crafts using indigenous materials, using a cooperative as the umbrella organization. So it's time for us to emphasize this need to support our farming community. And I think the next thing we need to do, Mr. Speaker, is look at the water rates for the farmers. I know there's resistance by GWA to reestablish the agricultural rates. But I think that has to be a near future target of ours, to do that also for the farmers, to help promote this agricultural productivity initiative. But I stand in support of this initiative. I commend Senator Ben and others who are behind this. And I know the farmers will do everything they can to produce the agricultural products that this community wants, needs, and really does deserve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Guthridge. Any other member of the legislature wish to speak on the bill before I call on the author to close? Senator Peng. I thought you spoke. Oh, I'm sorry. Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry I didn't bring my my long hand down here with me. I mean, I'm sitting directly in front of you and you still miss me. But thank you very much. Okay. Thank you again very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise also in support of this bill, Bill number 152, which is relative to a Farmers Cooperative Association of Guam. I think this is long overdue, and it's unfortunate that it had to take, of course, several of our farmers to come to us to try to revive again the co-op. As the senator who spoke before I did, I guess we're dating ourselves when we really talk about the Green Revolution, because I was actually under the administration of then former Governor Ricky Berdalio, and up to the very end, the man had lived, his belief, his philosophy about the Green Revolution. Because even at the time when it was the most difficult time for him, he found solace by actually going out and trimming and picking and caring for the manzanitas that were planted throughout Hagatna. And I think that that's very important, that when we actually talk and behave and think, what we believe, and that truly was the case. It was also the case where DOE at that time purchased a lot of the local produce from the farmers market, and that again also promotes what we, and I know America has been promoting this, is to buy local, and then we all know that the best fruits and vegetables are those that are fresh. And I would love to see the day where eventually co-op will be able, or the farmers under the co-op and any other farmers, that they'll be able to open up their farms where individuals, buyers, will be able to go and pick up a basket and pick their fruits. I remember when I did that in the mainland, I was totally thrilled by having to go and pick strawberries myself and the family, and then to take them home. So I would love to see eventually that happen here. I think what this would also do, and I know that there's the negative part when we think about the Chamorro Trust, where lands were being leased to people to farm, and that many of them, or some of them maybe, have not actually been using the lands for those specific reasons. And I think with the creation of and the continuance of now the co-op, that these individuals would surely be motivated then to go and do exactly what it is that the land was supposed to be leased for. And I think when you get a group of farmers who come together, they'll be able to support each other. The one thing that I like to also see, and I think, and I'm thinking that with the Farmers Co-op, this association will be able to not just pull the farmers together, but possibly actually look at seasonal type crops where we don't have everyone planting the same thing, and then they end up saturating the market to the point that then there may end up being spoilage and loss, of profit, and I surely don't want to see that. And it's very difficult when you're by yourself and doing this, and naturally you want the best, you want the most popular, the most fruit or vegetable that on the demands of the community. So I think that this association would definitely help them. There's a really big push as well, to go healthy. So that means eating, fresh fruits and vegetables, and I know that they too would be promoting that. There's just so many positive things about this. You'll be able to create jobs. I know that everybody here in the community, when you ask anyone what is the driving force of our economy, we always say immediately it's tourism and the military. Well, I really like to see this, the Farmers Co-op, become very successful, because the one thing that we always fail to recognize, I think, in our community are our human resources, and not just our human resources, but then our natural resources. And when you put those two together, then most definitely they would be able to help drive this economy as well. And I rather see this. I rather lease all our properties to our farmers on the island than for us to lease our properties for the military buildup. I'd like to also share something with you. I mean, of course I don't have the hands of a farmer. Many times I think that I might kill some of the plants that I do touch, but I have to honestly say that I do have lemon trees and mango trees, and this past weekend I actually went and picked bags, as a matter of fact 300 lemons, and it was such a wonderful feeling to be out there picking the lemons. I know some of my colleagues are looking at me because I normally bring them in and give them out to our colleagues here, but I just think that it's a wonderful thing. I don't know what it is, because maybe it came from my own land, and it's in one of my trees, but it's just it's a wonderful feeling. I know I won't be able to be a farmer, but it's a wonderful feeling to have. Most recently, as a matter of fact, just last week, I'd like to be able to share with you, because this is a big movement. If we don't even, if we can't think about it, we can't fathom actually what's happening globally, but then when you really look at what's happening locally, then I think we'll be able to realize what it is that we do in our own island, and how it eventually would affect our planet, our Mother Earth, globally. And just last week we had this conference with our school children, and there was this exhibit, as a matter of fact, that's at the Ghana Shopping Center, and today would be the last day in which it will be taken down. It's an exhibit that travels the world. It started out in South Africa, and it talks about climate change and how climate change is actually throwing off a lot of this, the climate itself, the weather itself, that are beginning to throw off farmers in terms of when then can they farm and when they shouldn't farm, what type of crops, because of the rain and drought. And it's so wonderful to see that these were school children who attended, and it's amazing some of the things that we were talking about. Almost every child that walked away felt then the need to act locally, and one of the things that they feel would be great to do locally would be able to plant trees, and plant fruits and have a garden vegetable, and that was their way to contributing to planet Earth by acting locally, but they're thinking globally. So it's a wonderful thing when we're starting to see our whole community come together, not just our children, but the adults as well, who would be then setting up this co-op. So overall, Mr. Speaker, I think it's really wonderful. I support it 100%. I wish our farmers great success. And if there's anything, of course, that this government can do to assist, not just now, but sometime again in the near future, with grants maybe that might be available federally, I definitely believe that this legislature supports them 100%. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Speaker Wampat. Speaker Pangilinan, I believe, let me just check one more time. Are there any other members of the legislature who wish to speak on the bill? If not, Speaker Pangilinan, please close.
Sidismasi, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much to all my colleagues who certainly have participated in the discussion and the crafting of this bill. I have one final amendment before I just do my final closing. It's been passed out, and it would be to add a new section H to 68.971.6. And it would read basically that the lease shall include a provision requiring that after 7 years, that's really a startup period, 7-year term, 10% of the lessee's annual retained earnings for the previous fiscal year from other than the sale of produce, so any other value-added activities that occur at the farmer's facility up there, not counting crops, because we want to try to keep those as affordable as we can, from this, other than the sale of produce, shall thereafter be remitted to the account of the Ancestral Lands Bank, and then increase 5% every year, every 5 years thereafter, for the remaining term of the lease to a maximum of 50%. Since the land is being used from this that was previously in the Ancestral Lands Bank, we wanted to give some of the proceeds of the retained earnings or profit, is the term for a for-profit corporation, back to the land bank so that we can continue to make members of our community whose lands have been taken and have not been able to be returned whole by extinguishing their claims from the payment of cash rather than return of the land. And so this would allow the farmers co-op in their activities there to complete or to contribute towards fulfilling that mission of the Ancestral Lands Bank. So I offer this amendment.
Does everybody have a copy of the amendment?
I had it passed out, yes.
Anybody wish to speak on the Pangilinan amendment? Is there an objection to the Pangilinan amendment? No objection. So ordered.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Very short. Everybody here talks about, do we remember the Green Revolution? Well, I'll tell you, I'm dressed in brown pants to signify the color of dirt, and in a green shirt to signify the green of the produce, and it was by no accident. I actually did wake up this morning figuring we were going to discuss Bill 152, remembered the Green Revolution, and decided to dress this way. Now you may think that's corny, but no, that's as corny as Senator Calvo being a farmer, I'm telling you. But so I'm dressed this way in truth, and Senator Calvo is a farmer in truth. But it is that remembrance of that, of a vision of seeing how different sectors of our community contribute to the overall economic health of this community, and in this case, the economic health of the community by the contributions of the of the farmers co-op and the farmers in our community contribute to the health, overall health of our community. And I wanted to just kind of feel good about that, feel good that I remember it, feel good that I support it, feel good about the vision of the farmers co-op, and feel good about what this body can do for this organization in contributing to their success. And so I offer this bill in that vein with those thoughts. I know all my colleagues that have spoken so fervently about their support for that same vision of increasing the opportunities for our farmers who very rarely get support and help. They toil while in the fields, and I always say the farmers, I love them. They have the dirtiest hands but the cleanest hearts in terms of what they want to do with their lives and what they want to contribute with this community. And I hope that our hearts and our work here contribute to their efforts and to the success of those efforts. And our vote will prove our commitment to that. So I want to thank everyone for their patience and their contribution to this bill, and thank everyone for their support of the bill as they so fervently articulated on the floor. Sidus Masi, the Biba Lanceros.
Thank you very much, Senator Pangilinan. I would have spoken, except I was embarrassed by the fact that I'm the only one that is willing to admit that I remember the Farmers Co-op in the Paseo. Even Senator Palacios only remembers it in Anigua, and I'm afraid that I'm going to be giving away my age by remembering it in the Paseo, and so I didn't want to make that admission too much publicly. But thank you very much. Is there a motion for lunch recess? Recess till 2 o'clock.